Hi. So today I'm going to talk to you about the Jonathan Haidt article, where he explores the question, are moral judgments based on reason or instead emotional gut reactions? And Haidt is going to argue that studies seem to indicate the latter, the second, that our moral judgments, at least in ordinary life, are based on emotional gut reactions. Although I think Haidt also means to additionally claim that even in the philosophy classroom, even among philosophers, we can't escape this bias, this inability to really base our judgments on reason, and we're really trapped by emotional gut reactions when we're making moral evaluations. So what studies is Haidt talking about? There's actually a lot of work in psychology recently on this topic, but the one that this paper talks about involves 30 participants presented with moral dilemmas, and these moral dilemmas are designed to put their gut instinct pulling in one direction and their reason pulling in the other. Haidt's hypothesis is that the participants will follow their gut instinct rather than reason. And this hypothesis at least seems to be borne out by this study. So first off, what does reason tell us about what's right and wrong? I mean, to say instinct pulls us in one direction and reason pulls us in the other, we need to talk about what reason's telling us is right and wrong. In this class, I think we've done a good job. I mean, we've talked about utilitarianism, we've talked about Kantian ethics, we've talked about virtue ethics, let's just pull back from those like specific theories. And like last week we talked about relativism, pull back and just make this sort of general claim. It does seem like when you try to make some sort of objective, rational, philosophical, ethical system work, there's sort of two kind of main focuses. One is an action's impact on welfare. And so my welfare, other people's welfare, the welfare of animals, anything that has a welfare. The action's impact on welfare, and the welfare means something usually like happiness over suffering or the balance of satisfied over unsatisfied desire. So, I mean, a utilitarian is specifically going to argue that morality is only an action's impact on welfare. But let's not try to be just utilitarian. Let's pull back and say, like, I'm not sure which ethical theory is right, but like one of these rational theories, one of these philosophically thought through theories that have justifications and proofs. I mean, one thing that seems to come up a lot and is this idea that an action's impact on welfare is the basis of morality. The other thing that seems to come up a lot and have a lot of and maybe give us the rational grounds for a moral theory is the respect for free choice and free wills. It's not clear whether that extends to animals. It might only be human beings with our higher level consciousness who can like plan long term and commit ourselves to thoughts about what we should do and hold ourselves to things. I mean, so free will, it's not quite, I mean, there's going to be a little bit of a discussion of what this ability of choice involves, but the idea would be, rocks don't have that. Insects, I mean, maybe insects don't have that. Maybe all other animals except for humans and higher apes don't have it. But that morality is based on respecting and valuing people's free choices for how they decide to lead their own lives. So utilitarians offer details which focus on the first, while Kantians offer a detailed theory focusing on and justifying the second. But it seems like any sort of rational philosophical theory is going to really focus on these two fundamental basis points. I haven't really mentioned virtue ethics here, but that's a little messier to figure out what they would say. So for now, I'm just going to take as granted, what does reason tell us about what's right and wrong? For something to be right or wrong, it's got to trace back to something about an action's impact on welfare, or trace back to the violation or upholding of issues of consent, free choice, and autonomy. So regardless of which theory of rational moral right and wrong turns out to be correct, we can craft cases to offer our subjects which do not seem to violate any moral rational theory. Cases which are harmless and wrongless, but nevertheless still disgusting. So the cases that Haidt uses in these experiments are ones which don't impact anybody's welfare in a negative way, don't violate free choice and autonomy, and yet there's still the things which our gut instinct is going to tell us is wrong and disgusting. And that's what he's trying. Those are the sorts of cases he's presenting his subjects with to try seeing whether whether their moral judgments is just gut instinct or if it's actually coming from sort of rational theory. He has two cases. I think the first one's not is the lesser of the two. I'm not quite sure if he's quite described this case in the way he needs to describe it, because I think there is a little bit of a consent issue still here. But the cannibalism story. So this story goes, Jennifer works in a medical school pathology lab as a research assistant. The lab prepares human cadavers that are used to teach medical students about anatomy. The cadavers come from people who had donated their body to science for research. One night, Jennifer is leaving the lab when she sees a body that is going to be discarded the next day, cremated. Jennifer was a vegetarian for moral reasons. She thought it was wrong to kill animals for food. But then, when she saw a body about to be cremated, she thought it was irrational to waste perfectly edible meat. So she cut off a piece of flesh and took it home and cooked it. The person had died recently of a heart attack, and she cooked the meat thoroughly so there was no risk of disease. Is there anything wrong with what she did? So this is the case that's presented by a researcher to one of these subjects, and then they give them the story and they ask them, is there anything wrong with what she did? The second story, another case that they offer, is, I think this is the better of the two, the incest story. Julie and Mark, who are brother and sister, are traveling together in France. They are both on summer vacation from college. One night, they're staying alone in a cabin near the beach. They decide it would be interesting and fun if they tried to making love. At least, it would be a new experience for each of them. Julie was already taking birth control pills, but Mark uses a condom too, just to be safe. They both enjoy it, but they decide not to do it again. They keep that night as a special secret between them, which makes them feel even closer to each other. So what do you think about this? Was it wrong for them to have sex? I'm not asking you this question. This is the case as it's presented to the subjects in this psychological study. Cannibalism and incest are written carefully to avoid any harm or violation of choice or consent. Again, I'm not entirely sure if that's true of the cannibalism case, because in the cannibalism case, the subject consents to having their body used by science, but maybe not eaten by a researcher. It might have been better if the cannibalism case was modified to have, I don't know, two buddies who are both curious what eating human flesh is like, and they make a pact that if either one of them dies before calling 911, the other one will cut off a piece and eat it. I mean, I can imagine, I'm absolutely certain that's happened in war. I mean, as a soldier who's been on the battlefield, I'm sure there's two guys who are like, if I die on the battlefield, eat a little bit of me just to see what I'll do the same for you, right? You can imagine that would be more of a cannibalism case that doesn't have any sort of consent issue. I think the cannibalism case here does a little bit. The incest case, on the other hand, no one's harmed. There's no consent issue. And the normal sorts of cases, the reasons we think of incest as being wrong is because there's the possibility of procreation, and incestuous relationships can give birth to children with birth defects. And then, of course, the other problem is when it's children in a family, right? Parents and kids, or an older brother taking advantage of a younger sister, or an older sister taking advantage of a younger sister or brother. Those are just rape. Those are violations of consent. That's coercion. That's taking advantage of somebody. So in this incest case, I think that successfully avoids any sort of rational objection to the morality of the case. Nevertheless, your gut instinct and your social upbringing is going to make you respond to thinking that that's immoral. So it would seem that cannibalism and incest are cases which rational moral theories wouldn't have an argument against. Asterisks for the cannibalism case, because I don't know if that's entirely true about that one. What is the result when the subjects are asked to evaluate these two cases? As expected, a strong majority said it was wrong to eat human flesh or to have consensual incest with one's adult sibling. Why do we say as expected? Well, one, there's cultural reasons, societal reasons why those things are, so you might expect people to be raised to find those things wrong. But really, there's evolutionary reasons why you can expect everybody to have, unless your society trains it out of you, the natural inclination is to find cannibalism and incest wrong, disgusting. Why? Well, cannibalism, because it puts you at high risk of disease, right? For the same reason that evolution makes feces and dead bodies smell bad to you, to make you keep them away, because they're vectors for disease. And if you didn't find dead bodies disgusting and your own feces disgusting, then you wouldn't stay away from it, and then you would be you'd be vulnerable to getting sick and dying. So natural selection would push you out of the gene pool. The only people who have survived natural selection are people who find feces and dead bodies disgusting. Similarly, the only people who have made it through natural selection are the ones who find cannibalism disgusting. Also with incest, anybody who didn't have the predisposition not to find the people you grow up with, which from what I understand is not just your siblings, but kind of like everybody who you grow up with, so also your neighbor who you see all the time, that evolved into us is to not see them as sexual objects. Of course, that's not always the case, and social upbringing can override that, but the default is to find incest disgusting and actually morally wrong, because our sense of morally wrong is often brought about by what we find disgusting, or confused with our sense of disgust. So the fact that we find incest disgusting makes us also lead to seeing it as morally wrong, and the reason we find it disgusting is because people who didn't find it disgusting and bred with their siblings led to having children with birth defects, and then their family line died out, and now the only people left are the ones who did find it disgusting. So, as expected, the strong majority said it's wrong to eat human flesh or have consensual incest with one sibling. Why? Because there is good evolutionary reason to think that those things are pre-programmed into us. Find those disgusting and morally wrong. So, gut instinct pulls us in one direction to find these wrong. It seems like when you think about consent and impact on welfare, so what I'm calling the rational thinking of rationalizing, or the rational theories of morality, seems to say that there's nothing wrong with these cases. So these scenarios are supposed to present subjects with cases where rationality pulls them one way and gut instinct pulls them in the other. They additionally, let me just mention real quick, additionally in the study, the researcher who's presenting the subjects with these cases, they also had a script. So they got the subject's gut reaction, like, is this right or wrong? And when they said it was right, wrong, at least, I don't know what they did when they said it was right. I think they did, but they have a list of responses to kind of prod and push the subject to say, like, okay, well, what's wrong about it? And if they say something like, incest causes children to be born with defects, and then the researcher has, like, on their script a written response that they're supposed to use to prod. They say, well, both of them are using birth control, so there's no chance or there's very little chance of having offspring in this case. So if that's not the problem with it, what is the problem? So there's a list of prodding questions that the researchers also ask the subjects after getting their initial response to these cases. After discussion with the interviewer did change some people's minds with this prodding in the direction for which he was playing devil's advocate. The percentage of participants who changed their minds averaged 16%, which did not differ significantly across tasks. So in these two cases, and the other ones that the study involved, about 16% had their minds changed once they were pushed on their initial reaction. And there's a number of responses which they tracked in how people responded to these cases. 4 is what I want to talk about, and what they described. First, it's often happened that participants made unsupported declarations. For example, it's just wrong to do that. That's terrible. Second, participants often directly stated that they were dumbfounded. That is, they made a statement to the effect that they thought an action was wrong, but they could not find the words to explain themselves. Participants made statements in incest, 38 statements from 23 different participants, and cannibalism, 24 statements from 11 of the participants. Third, participants often said, I don't know, sometimes several times in a row. So I imagine them saying, yeah, cannibalism is wrong. I don't know why. I don't know. Fourth, we observed an interesting pattern in which participants start giving an argument, but as they were talking, they realized that the argument wasn't going to work, and they stopped in the middle of it without any prompting from the experimenter. We called this pattern a dead end. So, summary of results. On the two moral intuition cases, cannibalism and incest, the same participants reported being unsure and confused. They reported relying on their gut feelings more than their reasoning. They dropped most of the arguments they put forward, and they frequently made unsupported declarations, as well as frequently admitting that they could not find reasons for their judgments. So what conclusion does Haidt and his co-authors want us to draw from this? Well, Haidt has a number of papers arguing for the same sort of conclusion. And before I read it, I want to tell you a little bit about, I don't know which slide it's going to be, but the duck rabbit, which is this image that you should see on this slide. The duck rabbit is a classic drawing. You should be able to look at it one way and see a duck with the bill pointing leftward and the duck looking leftward, and you can see a rabbit if you look at it in a different way, with the rabbit looking to the right and his ears going to the left. And what's interesting about the duck rabbit is that it's the same image, it's the same lines, and yet when it switches back and forth between seeing it as a duck and seeing it as a rabbit, it feels like the image is changing. It seems like visually it looks different to you. What this shows, or is supposed to show, is that what we see in the world is not just lines and drawings and then I guess or infer that there's a duck there or there's a rabbit there. Actually, my concepts of duck infuse and change the character of what I'm seeing, visually change it. So when I see it as a duck, it looks different to me than when I see it as a rabbit. And this is what we call maybe seeing as that, or seeing that. I see that it's a rabbit or that it's a duck. The concept is infused in the image to make it look differently than it would look if it was just lines or if I saw it through the lens of a different concept. Okay, now that I've explained that, it's going to help when we talk about the concluding paragraph. So the concluding paragraph, or the summary of the conclusion, Haidt and his co-author cites two other results coming out of other psychological researchers. Nisbet and Wilson, 1977, theorized that people generally do not have introspective access to the cognitive processes involved in making many judgments. Instead, people make ex post facto, after the fact, guesses as to what caused them to make judgments based on salient or important information that they have available. The claim here is that often, or generally, people make judgments, they don't know why they made them, and when you ask them for the reasons for their judgment, they don't have any special access as to why they made them. Instead, they offer guesses as to why they might have made them. So they're coming up with reasons why it would make sense to say this judgment, but it may not be any, those reasons, there's no reason, those reasons are guesses as to why someone might make the judgment, not some sort of special access into how they themselves came to that judgment. Margolis, 1987, theorized, in general, human cognition usually involves a quick, intuitive seeing that, followed by a critical ex post facto, after the fact, reasoning why, in order to explain why one came to the conclusion one did. This study provides support for the theory that moral judgments are often based on an intuitive feeling of rightness or wrongness, which is followed by reasoning why, based on the most salient, important features of the situation in order to explain the judgment. So the conclusion here is something like that our moral judgments really are these gut emotional reactions. They're not reason-based. It's not that I have justifications for my judgments. And even though people often will offer you explanations and justifications for why they make the judgments they do, the claim is those are justifications and reasons they invent after the fact, not based on, probably not the reason or cause of their judgment, but instead rationalizations or confabulated sets of reasons and justifications which they come up with after they've made the judgment just to try to justify themselves to you. Maybe not even good reasons. It's really their gut reactions which are driving the judgments they're making, and reasons and rationality are just this ephemeral, after the fact, non-causal thing that comes in afterwards to try making it seem like they had good reasons for what they were doing, even to themselves. So what's the takeaway? It seems like ordinary moral judgment and moral common sense is probably mostly gut instinct driven, with reasons being invented after the fact to justify our initial gut reactions. Does this undermine serious theoretical, philosophical, moral thinking? Tentatively, I want to say no. I think Haidt actually thinks maybe yes. That in this class, we've learned about utilitarianism, we've learned about Kantian ethics. I feel like we've taught a lot about basing morality on caring about welfare or autonomy and free choice and giving reasons for our moral judgments, and talked about a number of specific moral cases. I mean, what Haidt might say here is all I've done is given you more tools to rationalize and justify your gut reactions, but your gut reactions are still going to be driving your moral judgments. I haven't in any way changed the dynamic where emotional gut reactions are driving your judgments and reason is just coming in after the fact to give it the appearance of rationality. I don't think that that's correct. I think that we can escape the slavery to our emotional gut instincts and that we can think about a rational philosophical theory of morality and understand the underpinnings of what should be driving our moral judgments instead of just our emotional gut reactions and overcome them. I think we've done that in a number of cases, but maybe I'm wrong. Either way, the Haidt research does seem to imply we should be seriously skeptical toward our ordinary moral common sense thinking. So when people, for a long time, for example, it was a part of common sense moral thinking in the 90s that gay relationships were wrong, that they're disgusting, that there was something immoral about them. And you can very easily see that people gave reasons for these, for why they thought that. I don't think that those reasons were the reasons that they believed that gay relationships were wrong. It was probably a gut emotional instinct reaction, and then they just kind of tried to reach after the fact for any reasons they could come up with in order to justify the judgment, which they made on the basis of a gut instinct that I think came from socialization and inculturation as opposed to reasoned argument. Not in every case. Maybe there's some people who had an argument that convinced them that gay relationships were wrong, but probably in most people's cases, it was just a gut instinct that they came up with reasons for after the fact. So, I mean, here's some other so-called moral taboos that I think society tends to treat as moral wrongs that are probably things that you can't find good justifications for being wrong if you think of morality as in terms of impact on people's welfare or violations of free will and free choice. So gay relationships and sex, violating gender norms, so men not being masculine or women being masculine, masturbation, weird sexual kinks, for example, foot fetishes, although that's probably not that weird, non-harmful bestiality, non-reproductive and consensual incest, consensual cannibalism, dietary practices like eating dog or cat or bat instead of cow and pig, open relationships, deciding not to have kids or not get married. If you're a woman and you decide not to have kids or not get married, you're going to have a lot of people giving you a really hard time for the rest of your life, calling you selfish and immoral for doing that. Cursing, opting to use villainized recreational drugs, for example, mushrooms rather than accepted ones, for example, alcohol and tobacco. I chose mushrooms very particularly instead of crack because maybe there's a story to tell about why crack is not something that you should get involved in. But from what I understand, hallucinogenic mushrooms are pretty benign. And then sexual promiscuity, if you're a woman. I think it's not generally looked down upon if you're a guy. In fact, it's probably encouraged. All of these cases seem to be things that similarly people are often taught and told and our society might treat as wrong, and I can't see the rational basis for saying that they're wrong. People will tell you reasons why they're wrong. They'll give reasons for why they say they are wrong. But these are cases which I think Haidt is right about, that they are cases where it's just your gut instinct that comes from the way you were raised or the television shows you watched, or often probably the way your peers were when you were growing up. So the fact that when you were in junior high or elementary school, your peers treated being gay as bad and gross is probably the reason that you grow up to find it bad and gross and have that gut reaction. And then when you make that, you have that instinctual moral judgment, you might give reasons for why you think it's wrong, but really those reasons are coming in, they're not really behind your thinking. They're just coming in after the fact to justify an initial emotional gut reaction, which is not stemming from reason, but from social causes, cultural causes, sometimes evolutionary causes, and inborn biological instincts and emotions, in the case of cannibalism and incest, for example. And I mean, why am I talking about this? I'm a pretty boring guy. I don't have, I'm a straight guy. I'm a pretty normal Texan dude who's, aspires to be masculine and successful at sports and football. And I'm a vegetarian. I'm not a cannibal. I don't eat weird things. I'm monogamous, never had an open relationship. I don't have any weird sex things. I spent a lot of time in the military, so I've really underexperienced in the world of drugs. It's like all of this stuff, I have no dog in this fight defending these things, although I do, have a bit of a problem with people being shamed and treated as immoral for engaging in these things. But what really fucking pisses me off is as somebody who cares about morality and thinks that it's really wrong to murder innocent people. Serial killers are fucked up people, and they are and like mugging people, robbing people and making, I don't know if you've ever had someone break into your house and take things from your house, but like it's not only a violation, but it makes you feel unsafe. Is that person coming back? Rape, sexual assault, cheating on somebody, like to see your partner find out about that sort of thing or to be cheated on, it's devastating. These are just really harmful things that hurt people. I mean, I've been to war. I've seen a lot of death and in any case, right? There are serious moral issues, and the way in which teaching kids and confusing people with treating this stuff, this piddly, unimportant stuff as moral issues, to take, I just don't like it, or my gut reaction, and treat that as the guide to morality, and to say, well, that's wrong just because we don't like it, is to cheapen morality. And it makes kids, and I think when people are growing up, it makes them doubt the reality of morality, because when they think that morality is just a list of don't do drugs, be monogamous, don't be gay, and don't masturbate, well, like when they grow up and they decide that that's all bullshit and those rules are dumb, they're also going to start doubting the prohibitions on cheating on other people, on rape, on murder, on harming other people, and that is fucked up, right? That is undermining the importance and wrongness of a lot of things. We should be defending morality is, I think, also keeping it really separate and pure and not confused with just people's biases and gut emotional instincts about like stuff they don't like. We should be very clear about what morality is and what it isn't. And I think that it's really troubling to me and harmful to confuse morality with things that are not morality, but just things maybe your grandma doesn't like, or your buddy finds gross, or what we might naturally find disgusting, because that makes morality seem like it's just the arbitrary whims of whatever the fuck whoever's in power wants to say, like whatever they like and whatever they don't like, whatever they were raised to find disgusting and whatever they don't find disgusting. And that's a bad way of thinking about morality. We should do better. I hope that one of the things that this class has tried to do is to show, or at least hint, that there's a way to do better than just go by your gut instincts. And so one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this article and these topics is to make this overall lesson. I'm not trying to defend incest. I'm not trying to defend cannibalism. I'm trying to defend morality from confusing real moral wrongness with people's just emotional feelings of disgust.